Hey guys, welcome to episode 4 of Design Duels. My guest today is Forrest Imel. He has a very impressive resume. He's worked with companies like Riot, Valve, Disney, Google, Wizards of the Coast, and is currently a viz dev artist at Blizzard. He has 2 YouTube channels, one where he talks about art and his experience, and then another where he talks about game design. I highly recommend checking out both. I often listen to especially the game design one while I'm working. It's some really interesting stuff. There will be links in the description below for both channels. Highly recommend you check those out. Without further ado, hope you enjoy the episode with myself and Forrest. All right, Forrest, welcome to the channel.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing just fine today.
Thanks for coming. We decided on a topic, and it was alien street food chef. Let's not waste any time. Let's just jump right into it. So I'll just kind of talk you through my process loosely. Decided to start out with like just a bunch of different weird, goofy sketches. I had like no reference. I had kind of an idea in my mind. I will say this. I had a real hard time not thinking of the diner guy in Star Wars.
I was in the exact same headspace, by the way. I think you'll probably see that with mine.
It was definitely one of those, how do I not do that? And now that I said that, people will definitely look at it and be like, well, you kind of still did do that.
Yeah.
But I did my best to just make it at least a little bit nuanced. I think once I hit this stage, I did start looking up some actual references of like, there's these really bizarre birds that have these, I don't even know what you'd call. They're like these like growths right here that look kind of like mustachy.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So I was kind of trying to go for that. You can see I already have the overweight guy with the beater and stuff. And then I kind of jumped into just doing a lot of arms because I figured, I don't know if you've ever played like Overcooked or if you've ever cooked in real life, but you're always multitasking a ton of stuff. So I kind of thought it'd be cool to have him have just a ton of arms to be able to do everything he kind of needs to be doing.
Gross.
Can't really see it yet, but the top... Sorry, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say like the fact that he's got like 4 arms, but like 2 of them are really big and 2 are like normal, like kind of more proportionate and stuff is really gross. I mean, it really is. His face is gross, but I really like it. I like yours a lot more than I like mine already. So. Oh,
really?
Yeah.
Well, we'll see what happens. But this is probably my favorite part, actually. I decided to give him smoking a cigar too, just because if you have so many arms and you're just using one to smoke, I feel like that's like, it's that important. It's like, yeah, no matter what, I got to be smoking. And I kind of wanted him to have like mechanical arms, and it's like 4 arms wasn't enough. He needed more. I had a really hard time. One thing I wish I would have had more time, like if this was a full concept, this wasn't just like straight into kind of an illustration. It would have been fun to explore like coming up with different kinds of food that he could cook and stuff. My brain kind of went to like sushi right away as like it's weird. I love sushi, but it just feels exotic. So I don't know why that's when I think of like not just street food, but alien street food. I was having a hard time trying to come up with something that was like really bizarre, and I think it would have taken a lot more like referencing and like looking into stuff.
I felt like I kept wanting to think of like where they were cooking or like what their booth was like and stuff like that. It's funny. I think we were pulling from a lot of similar like inspirations and ideas though with ours. I think we got our chefs could work in the same place. I think they'd fit right in.
Cool. Yeah, I'm excited to see that. So jumping into the rendering process, I'm curious to see like what your rendering process is. That's always something I'm like excited to see other people do, especially because I had one like super industry pro. I asked him for some advice, and I was like, what is your process? Because he had this like beautiful like realistic but painterly process that had a lot of like brush strokes in it and stuff. And I was just like curious, like how does he, what is the stages that he goes through and whatever? And he was like, oh well, it's pretty standard. That's like all he said. He's like,
it's
okay, but
standard.
I kind of want to know like how you get there, because that can really like change the style or the efficiency. So
It's funny, your rendering process, from what I can see, like here, it reminds me of like old school Blizzard, a little bit of like
Oh,
Glen
okay.
Rain. My buddy Brandon, actually, I feel like paints like this a lot too, where you're starting with like this darker value, and you're sort of like building up the value further as
Yeah.
it gets like closer towards the viewer and stuff. It's really
Yep.
interesting. It gives this like it I don't know why it feels like this kind of like mid 2000s, early 2000s thing. I think from like Blizzard maybe,
Yeah.
and then sort of started going into like a lot of Russian games started kind of taking the same sort of art style in
Yeah.
around that era.
Interesting. It's kind of a recent thing for me too. I used to go light to dark and do a lot more like shading, and I learned from Hardy Fowler, who was like a previous guest on the channel, to do this method instead, especially for anatomy, and it just clicked with me a lot better. Like everything started getting to where it needed to be a lot faster. And then like I paint miniatures every once in a while too, and
That
for
makes
some
perfect
reason,
sense. Yeah.
same thing. Going dark to light just makes way more sense to me for whatever reason.
That was the exact same way that when I first started learning how to like blend and paint and stuff like that, is the exact same process for me. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had to go in and redraw all the mechanical arms just because I had a hard time. I was gonna jump in and just like painting them with like shapes and lasso tool, but
Yeah.
I had a hard time like visualizing that, especially with perspective and stuff. I ended up deleting the arm on the left, as you'll see later. I kind of wish I would have kept it now.
Ah, it looks good.
Yeah, I don't know why I deleted it now. Like now that I look back, I think it
Yeah,
might have been like just a composition thing, but I kind of liked the flow of that.
yeah, it
Um,
fills that like negative space really nicely on that
yeah,
side.
which I do go in and fill that,
Oh, okay.
but I kind of wish. I don't know. I don't know if it was like a laziness of I don't want to paint another arm thing. I really don't remember. Um, but I kind of forgot it was even there, and I wish it kind of was back now. But
Yeah, I love the level of detail you have here with like the intricacy of the robotics and stuff. I'm not like a big mech robotic guy at all. So whenever I see anyone drawing stuff like this, to me that takes so much patience.
Yeah.
Like personally, my brain just doesn't go there. I don't pull from
Yeah.
enough like intuitive inspirations or anything like that to do that.
I think it's hard to, and I've struggled with this a lot, just jumping styles. Like if I am doing different projects that have different style requirements, it's like hard for me to, like I notice if I stay in one style a lot longer, it's way more efficient and like easy to get through it. But kind of the same thing, if I go back and forth between like drawing organic things a lot and then like hard surface stuff a lot, it's like I'm super rusty on the hard surface stuff. I used to draw like spaceships a lot more and things like that, and like I haven't in a long time, and I think it would be a struggle for a while, I think. And this kind of was too. Just have a little bit of lighting indication there. One thing I always want to get better at is cast shadows. I think they can just really define like a volume so well.
Yeah, I think what you have there is like the arrow as reference is super helpful.
Yeah.
I know like something about it's just so not intuitive to consider lighting at all. And I remember when I was really starting to like dedicate a ton of time trying to figure out like how the hell does anybody paint light at all? Like trying to go over other people's paintings with arrows and like tracing the general like direction that they were sort of considering the lighting helped like a ton.
Yeah. And then like it clicked with me too when I realized how many people used like either 3D or back in the day like literal clay maquettes and stuff.
Yeah.
Like I didn't realize like James Gurney would build these like crazy freaking like for one page of like Dinotopia, he would build like a massive set just to light it, and it's like I wish I want to learn 3D better just for that sake only, just to learn lighting better, because it's so. I think for me, like you said, it's not intuitive for me in a lot of scenarios, but
yeah. I'm way too lazy to do anything like that. Whenever I saw artists doing maquettes, I was like, okay, I just want to get to a point that I don't have to do that, because that just sounds like so much work. I've seen artists that do that.
It's like doing like the draw through method when you're doing like a lot of perspective. It's like I kind of want to be good enough that I just don't have to do that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, in order to get good enough to do that, you kind of have to do it for like a bit, and then you're like, oh, okay.
Usually, like if I this ended up being a much more detailed illustration than I had kind of originally planned, but when I hit this stage, you can see there's like red flashing on and off. I like to highlight like areas that I think are like biggest bang for your buck improvement, because otherwise I get too ADHD and I start like not knowing what to focus on. So you'll kind of see that pop up once in a while.
Like trying to make sure that your focus is still on rendering like the areas of importance, focal points.
Yeah, not like over detailing areas that don't really matter and stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think it's tough because I mean it's like after doing this for so long, like at a certain point, I'm probably just lazy now at this point where I just kind of I stop thinking about certain things and some things end up becoming intuitive. But I think that like it's so hard to think about so many different things at once. And I really like your process here because I think you set yourself up for success in that like you're starting with the design, then you're working in some of the lighter rendering. And it's like you're handling even the lighting like individually, right? Where it's like you're doing one light source and then another light source, then another light source. You're trying to make sure that you set up like a system for yourself for success as you're moving forward in the image to make sure that you're not going to be missing anything and you're keeping in mind what's like most important and stuff. I think all that is great.
And like sort of, I don't know if it's ironic really, but it's more like surprising is the more I plan a piece out, the more fun I have with it, just because it does go smooth. And if I do kind of like segment those things, or do those one things at a time, like if I'm designing in the phase where I should be rendering, it's always bad. Like it's always like, I'm trying to save a design that didn't look good in the first place or something, and then it's never. And I'm not afraid to do that. Like I think you have to kind of at the end of the piece here, if you're far enough along, you can't be afraid to say like, I got out of design way too fast. I'm rendering, but I need to fix the design. It's just not doing it for me.
Yeah, I definitely think it's like over time you can get good enough where like, you can think about like 10 different things all at once or whatever, and you can start to see the matrix. But like, I think like even I've done this for so long, I still feel like an idiot, and that like I cannot think about trying to make something look interesting and correct at the same time. And like I have to separate those things or else my brain just like doesn't function. I can only really focus on one or the other,
which I think is how like everybody should learn it, at least. Like I'm sure some people can get there faster, but it's even like, I don't know if you've ever played an instrument, but like I would like to be able to play guitar and sing at the same time. And I can do one or the other. Doing both, I'm not there yet. And it's like you have to be good enough at both of them that they are kind of autopilot, and then be able to put them together. And I haven't gotten there with a lot of the painting skills yet, I can say that for sure. Especially looking at like traditional painters, when it's like, you don't have adjustment layers, like you're just throwing down this exact color immediately, and you know what to do there. Like I can't do that. But
I think some of the like biggest like developments I ended up seeing in my own work was usually when I would decide to quit thinking about so many things at once and just dedicate so much time to one particular thing. And like I remember a big one for me was like color and value, was because so many people work directly in color. But like if you're working directly in color, you're having to think about hue and saturation and chroma and all these things, and you're thinking about value. But most people are because color is so finicky, like you can't also be thinking about value at the same time. It's just like really hard to separate that until you like take the time to separate it and slowly introduce another one back into it.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's just super valuable for learning anything really, is just breaking it down into digestible pieces that you can actually focus on.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, let's move on to your video.
So when I started, I was way too ambitious.
And
I kept thinking like more about like the character itself and the setting they were in. And I think it was probably good for me to do this because I felt like if I can't think of like the totality of the story or the context that the character is existing in, it's a lot harder for me to get excited about the nuances of what the character will have. And so like on the right, I spent a good, hour or so just like going through Pinterest and like finding images I thought were cool, labeling them for like character, carts, food, stuff like that.
Was in like 45 minutes of that was probably just filtering out all the AI junk.
Yeah, some AI is still probably in there, but and so I just got really excited thinking like, oh, what if there's this big food cart on like a slug, and this guy is like working the front counter, but there's like automation basically that's handling all the food, and all the food is just like spitting out the back of the slug onto this like floating like diner bar or something.
Yeah.
And the menu is on these like weird like LED screens that are flashing all over the place and stuff. And I really wanted to do all this, but this would have been way too much.
I mean, I'm glad you left it in here, and like the sketch is awesome. And I've never. It's easy to feel like you've wasted time on something when you do something like this, and then what you end up with is not this.
Yeah.
But I've never regretted it. Like every time I go way off doing something like that, if it's just like ideation stuff especially, I don't feel like I was like, well, that ended up being worth my time. Like I got a lot out of it, even if you distill it down to a character. I don't know if you feel like that or not, but
yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, the thing is like once I set that setting in, it's sort of me taking the extra time to explore. Like, all right, well, what does this character like do? Where are they? Like, what is the general feeling I want for them? And so I'm not going to actually finish that full image, but it gave me the opportunity to then zoom in and be like, okay, who's this guy that actually runs this place now? Yeah. And this is me just kind of like sketching different ideas, exploring different like faces and stuff, but. Once I found like a pose I liked, I just started playing around, like thinking of what's the pirate from Treasure Planet and stuff. Like he was one that I kept thinking about. So instead of like a mechanical leg, I gave him like a big arm, and then thought, well, okay, why would he have a big whole arm? Maybe he cut his arm off, or his arm like got taken off by one of these like giant aquatic things that he's like grabbing. And so I had these like giant squids leave these like suction cup marks on sharks. And I thought like if he's got like suction cup marks on his arm as if it got like torn off, and then he just replaced it with like a saw like butcher knife or something.
Nice.
And so but really wanted to show like what exactly is like the alien like street food part, like, and I think just taking a obnoxiously large animal that would like never be something that some dude would just carry in onto a food cart is very silly. And I wanted to show this guy like grumpily sort of coming in and just about to throw it down on the table and start cutting it up.
I love the his like his little logo on his apron there too.
Yeah, I wanted to show that like maybe when he started the food cart, he looked more like that and was like happy.
he was happier when his eyes were full of dreams. And
I wanted it to be like I was thinking about showing him like maybe a little thinner too or something like that.
Yeah.
And just like having a lot more aspirations for what the cart ended up becoming. I really love, like, I don't know what it is, but something about like drawing giant folds of fat is really entertaining to me.
Yeah.
Because you can you can't completely like guess, but you can really play around with a lot of the shapes there.
Yeah.
So really like trying to exaggerate that and just really show like his like chest just sag around the sides of him and stuff.
Yeah,
really
you have
fun.
a really nice. I really like the shape. It's not just like the stomach like has a nice like angled flow kind of up his chest to his head too. It's like you elongated it to. It's not just a sphere, is what I'm trying to say.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Really trying to like sell, I guess like the weight behind him, and like even with the leg, like showing like the different like fat deposits and stuff, just like carry on his leg.
And why does it have to be aquatic? Like it just did, like in my head. It had to be aquatic. I don't know why that is, but I guess ocean stuff is pretty alien. But
most street food I think is usually some type of meat, and like it could have been, I guess, like beef or whatever. But yeah, I think whenever I was Googling stuff and like going through Pinterest and all the stuff that stood out was like stuff that you'd see in like maybe a small like Japanese market or like a Korean street vendor. I'm really into for a little while there's these videos on YouTube of like people that run their own food cart or whatever in like
Yeah.
in Korea, and there's like no audio or talking or anything. It's just them like opening up and cooking throughout the day.
Yeah.
And so I just kept thinking, okay, I'll do someone that opens one of those, but they're just miserable. Seemed to work out. And so now I'm just rendering at this point. But it's funny because I used to paint more kind of like how you were rendering, where like I would start with that darker value, find that general like shadow, and then start to build the light in. And now I find that like I usually start with some sort of like a general mid-tone. And what I tend to focus on now is just finding where that dividing line is between light and shadow.
Yeah.
Because if you can find that dividing line between light and shadow, you can then like you can go into the light, into the shadow with paint later on and like bump up the contrast.
Yep.
But the divide between the two is like really how you end up defining form.
Yeah.
And so like
it seems efficient. Like, I mean, you got to something that looks like it reads very three-dimensional very quickly.
Yeah, and this was something I had to kind of start learning when I was doing on a lot of work for like Legends of Runeterra and Riot stuff. Was like they have a very specific style that's like it's detailed, but it doesn't. You don't want it to look too detailed because it's not like actual League splash stuff.
Yeah.
And so you need to try and like mimic this form and light and detail and stuff without actually getting super tight and rendered with it.
Yeah, which I feel like mine is a little over-rendered anyway. Like, I really appreciate being able to see that it's art and it's not just, like, rendered to death.
Right.
Kind of like regardless of the genre, even if it's like a realistic thing. I don't know if you've seen, like, the Ghost of Tsushima art, but it's, like, it's so painted and textured, but it reads really realistic at the same time.
Yeah.
And if you took that texture away, at least the art itself wouldn't be nearly as like captivating. But it's funny because it's concept art. Like, you need to know what's going on in every little the portfolio for that game specifically is kind of like crazy high levels of both like painterliness and like realistic rendering. So that it's like got this weird mix of like you can tell exactly what's going on. If you need to do a 3D model or something, but it's also like super painterly still.
Yeah, and I think it's good to be able to find that balance, right? And a lot of it is just, especially for large scenes and settings and stuff, a lot of it is just like you get a good silhouette, you get a good shape, right? That's the external drawing of whatever you're working on. Understand if there's any important details to the interior shapes and drawing that you're working on, and then it's just like mimicking some form of color and light. And if you do that, even in really simplistic ways, like you're going to be able to sell whatever the character setting, whatever the object is, really, really well.
I think you got distracted. I think my favorite detail you put in so far is the like order papers, like people's orders that he's got clipped on. That's a good detail. It tells so much story with just one little item.
I was realizing as I was painting it, I was like, well, I don't know if he's still seeming like street food chef as much as he just seems like chef that is like dragging in some fish or whatever. And so I thought, like, what's something that like a street food chef would have to do? And it's like, well, they probably would have to clip the orders onto them as they're like moving around and stuff, because they're not like taking it right or reading it off of a thing. It's just them working. So they're just going to have it like on their body or something as they're like quickly trying to cook things.
Oh, I really like whatever textured brushes he used for like the smears on his apron too. Those are
yeah, that's Greg Rukowski's brushes are like really, really great for getting mimicking any sort of like traditional textures. I really like those.
I have a few that I like, but I'll have to get the link from you and I'll put it in like the video description as well. Yeah,
his brush set's really great. And then it hard cuts, but
no, that's awesome. I love it. I love how much like certain small details really complete the whole thing too. Like the dripping water reflections, I think, are awesome. Where is the? I'm just curious, like, what your idea is behind the glowing horn.
The glowing horn, like the thing on the side.
Yeah.
So I kind of thought like on the inside of him, if he's just got this like weird goop or whatever, it's almost like a
Yeah.
drug or something. So like he's kind of breathing it in, and I thought this would be like a filtration system.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But also it could be something that like maybe he like needs. So he himself was going to be like aquatic for a little bit. So I thought at first it was like blue or purple or something like that. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe this is like, if he's aquatic, maybe this is his thing that helps him like be able to stay out on land. And it's like this weird filtration thing to help him breathe. And then I started like working in the pipe, and the like blue and purple just didn't work anymore. Like for the colors, all the glowy and bright values was all orange. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll make this orange instead. And I like that it sort of tied into like what he was smoking and stuff like that. Like it's just kind of like coming out the side of him in a way.
I mean, no wonder he's grumpy though. I feel like he's got to like go kill the fish and then butcher it and then cook it. Like he's doing every part of his job.
Yeah, but I really wanted to do that full cart, but I had fun working on this guy, and I really honestly I just actually really like the fish itself. I think at this point most of the design that I really like end up not completely caring about, but I think the stuff that really makes or breaks a design for me is shape distribution.
Oh yeah, and I was gonna say like that's my favorite thing, especially with the fish. Like the shape design on the fish is really really good.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. Shapes and shape distribution for design is definitely something that like has been a big focus on me, and like something I've been trying to work on for a long time. And I think as you know, in my career, I've had to transition from working on so many character things into now working on general viz dev stuff. So I'm doing props or I'm doing environments or whatever.
Yeah.
And like shape design has just been consistent across the board, where like whether it's a character or an environment, I'm always having to think about like, okay, are the shapes interesting? Am I having a good balance of them? Are they large, medium, small, etc.? Is it, you know, feeling appropriate to whatever the scene or setting is?
Yeah.
So it's been a great skill to try and build up.
Yeah, I think it's something I'm definitely like trying to work on all the time too. Because every time I talk to anybody that I like admire in the industry or something, it's that it almost always comes down to that. Like almost every time, it's you can tell you have really good shape design, and that's what's like carrying your piece, regardless of like everyone at a certain level has good like fundamentals, right? Like anatomy and all that stuff. But it's like the interesting shapes that really end up like kind of being the design then. And like anything iconic, whether it's in a realistic or stylized like setting, I think ends up being like the cool shape design and like good hierarchy and stuff is what ends up really making it iconic and like cool.
Yeah, it's kind of like the difference between I don't know if this is actually the difference. I'm using an analogy for comedians, but I'm not a comedian. So, but to me, it feels like when like the difference between like the idea or setup and punchline of a joke versus being able to tell a joke. And it's like you could have a great idea, right? But if you can't really showcase that idea, or in this case, if you can't really properly like tell the joke, then it's not going to come out like funny, right? It's not going to be successful at what you're doing.
For sure.
And I see that all the time. There's like so many artists that I'll see. I don't think I'm particularly creative, really. And so there's so many artists, I'll see their portfolios and I'm like, man, I really like love their ideas. I love this design and stuff. Their shapes aren't doing it though. Like they just need to, if they can just format it just a little bit different, but that idea is really cool.
Yep, for sure. Especially like I've even like you can see people that render beautifully but their designs are just kind of boring.
Yeah, that's like, me. That's me 100%.
I disagree with that, but I've seen people. It's just crazy. Like I talked to Della Longfish quite a bit, and he did a lot of God of War stuff. He was like the lead character artist, or character concept artist, and he I think actually worked in stylized. I don't remember exactly what it was, but he worked on like stylized projects for a while, and he like kept talking about how important that was to doing like gritty realism later. Just because like it's almost like you like things need to be believable when they're in a realistic setting. Like they need to look like they could exist, and they're like you can't push things as far as you could in like a Disney movie or something. But I think like I still been trying to do this when I like do characters, even if it's a realistic character. I'll try to like think how would I design this if this was like an animated like Disney character? Like how would I really push those shapes? But then you're just kind of like skinning it with realism, and it like that weirdly ends up working better usually than, oh, I'm just drawing this realistic thing and then trying to like push the shapes a little bit, because you can almost always push it further than you think you can. But I still need to work on that a lot. That's like one of my main growth points I want to focus on.
Yeah, I think when the focus ends up being realism, then really all that is it's like, okay, I guess shape fidelity, texture fidelity, making sure the lighting is like realistic and stuff. But ultimately, that's not, you could do something that looks really realistic, right? But maybe it doesn't read super well. And it's just like fundamentally is not like as interesting of an image to look at. And so, I've seen tons of artists that like, that you can do like really, really great accurate textures, right? You can do really realistic textures and you can paint that's fantastic. But if you do that and it's on something that's like not well balanced or whatever, the values are off or shapes are off or whatever, then it's just not going to be, it's not going to feel as realistic as something that has better balance.
So like after doing this process, like what would you say like you learned, if anything? Maybe you didn't learn a damn thing. But
anything that I learned while working on it, it was nice being able to do a character on my kind of own time without external pressures, time pressures, production pressures and stuff like that. Because I feel like I realized in my own process how much more important it is to sort of set myself up for success, and that beyond just doing, thumbnail sketches or whatever of ideas. But I really do think like if I didn't start by exploring that first sketch of what the actual whole street food cart would look like and stuff like that, that's honestly what got me excited too, to like work on the character in the first place. But I think that it shows like how much story really ends up making a huge impact. And I think a lot of those small things, like considering that that's where the guy goes, right, allowed me to start thinking like, okay, well, what would he have on him? What would like he look like up close and stuff? What would people see as they go up to that initial cart?
Yeah, for sure. What I really liked what you said was it got you excited, because I think it's so easy to start off excited and like jump into a piece and like kind of get to the rendering point and then realize like, you know what, I'm actually not excited about this anymore. Yeah. But I think if you have a design that like is really good off the bat, just like the shapes and the sketch is like really exciting you, then usually that can like carry you through the whole thing if it's actually good. Whereas like sometimes I think it's good and I hit like the rendering stage or even the color stage and it's like, oh, there's like not enough here to be interesting anymore. Like the shapes read well in line art, but now it's not. And like I think that's I would like to get better at silhouette design and like starting in like the silhouette I can't remember like the method, like who's the guy that does all those
like silhouette, I don't know, Anthony Jones?
Shape carver.
Okay.
Yeah. Like doing kind of the shape carving method up front, I think would be great too. My brain just doesn't work in that as easily. Yeah. Yeah.
I will say that on the note of like getting excited enough, one thing I have noticed is that, the rendering process is so long that I feel like if I don't give myself some opportunity to like do some spontaneity, because I've worked in ways that like I did such a tight line drawing that like nothing could change. Yeah. That was what a lot of my like league work was when I would do league splash stuff. And I realized after working on that enough that like, one, it's not conducive to notes, because any feedback is like, well, okay, now my line art's done. But it also made it so that it just didn't offer any opportunities for me to like, I guess you could call it happy accidents, as much as I just think of it as like, you're just playing around. Like you suddenly feel like, oh, maybe I should do like this shape instead, or I should paint this here. Or maybe there's this other little detail in this character. And so, I had like a bunch of little things, right? Like I had like the fish hanging in the background, and I had like the different types of like condiments that the guy had. and like little tiny adjustments to his hat, because I was like, oh, it's kind of cool if like this hat comes off a little bit in the silhouette, and it just gives me the opportunity to be able to play around and not feel like I'm just doing like a job.
Yeah.
Because it can feel that way when you reach that render stage where you're like, oh, okay, now I just have to like do this part and then it's done. Giving yourself those opportunities to still feel like you're having fun with it, I think, is really important.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Yeah. So thanks for being on the channel. It was a pleasure. Loved your design. If you ever want to do it again, I say that to everybody, but like really, if you ever want to do it again, I would love to have you on the show.
Wow, you say it to everybody, huh? Wow.
Yeah, I mean,
I get it.
I've only had two. This is episode 4, so I've said it to the 2 people that I've had on and myself. So,
oh, okay. Well, yeah, thanks for having me. It was really fun.
Thanks again to Forrest for being on the channel. I had a great time as always. I'm still working on a Patreon. If you have any suggestions for what you'd like to see on that Patreon or on this channel, please let me know in the comments below. And thanks for watching. See you next time.